Welcome back. This is Titus Valspar, and I've got a very interesting topic here today. As you can see from the home screen, the decal that's up here in the corner. This is the decal that signifies that I've been selected for the open beta. This is a series that Kabam has done every now and again, but currently what this open beta is in regards to is for a champion rework regarding Venom and Carnage. Now I'm going to kind of analyze these two champions differently in separate videos just because I feel like it'll do both of those characters justice in their own right. But before we go ahead and jump into that beta, I would like to take a brief moment and just kind of look at what the current state for both of these champions are. Now, as you can see here, I have both Venom and Carnage in the real game, not in the beta. My Venom has been sitting at rank 4 for a while, and then my Carnage I've had at rank 3. But I have both the Champions Awakened. Venom actually is at max signature ability, whereas Carnage I only have the one-time dupe from a crystal. So the champion that I kind of want to take a look at currently, just because I've been having a little bit more experience working with him in this beta, though I have had a look at both of them, is Carnage. And so you can see from his profile here that I have him at rank 3. And just to kind of repass his abilities, currently Carnage doesn't really do a whole lot. He doesn't offer very much. He's kind of garbage for everything other than in terms of prestige. His damage output is very underwhelming, and there's just not a whole lot of value that is brought about by this champion. So what you can see is from his ability, whenever the opponent is bleeding, he gains 16.5 increased power gain, and again, that's while the opponent is bleeding. And the longer the opponent has been continuously bleeding, the greater his bonus, reaching that maximum bonus after 20 seconds. So you really have to be upkeeping a bleed on your opponent for a long period of time to even notice any sort of significant difference. And there's really only two ways to get an outstanding or continuous bleed triggered on your opponent, which we'll have a look at here in just a moment. Now you'll see each time Carnage performs one of the following actions, he will activate some smaller buffs, and these ones really don't factor in a whole lot until you start coupling them with the special attacks. So you'll see here that if he is hit, he gains a physical resistance charge. If he blocks, he gains a block proficiency charge. If he performs a light attack, he receives increased critical rating. If he performs a medium attack, he receives increased attack. And if he performs a heavy attack, then the critical damage is increased. Which those numbers are all right and decent, but just the lack of other items kind of caused the champion to be a little underwhelming. Now you can gain these as being more permanent after the activation of a special attack, which has a 10-second timer that rotates on it. And at the end of that 10-second timer, which begins upon activating a special attack, as soon as that timer expires, whatever of the preceding buffs was active on him at the time becomes permanent. Of course, those buffs can at that point be removed by Mystic champions or anyone else who has any type of nullify ability. Critical hits, as you can see here, have the chance to inflict a bleed on the opponent only if the opponent is already bleeding. And the only two ways that you can get a longer standing bleed to be standing on the opponent is by either performing a heavy attack, which is a two-part hitting heavy attack, which has a 100% chance to inflict bleed, and that bleed lasts for 10 seconds. Of course, this can be compounded by the Deep Wounds Mastery, which I do have maximized currently. I spent some of my Mystic Dispersion Refund to take that to its max rank. And the other way that you can cause a bleed, which also has a 100% chance, is by activating the Special 3, which also has a 100% chance to bleed. This bleed lasts for 20 seconds, and then as you can see with any of the critical hits, you have an 80% chance on a critical hit to cause another rather brief bleed to take place. And then there's some additional crit rating and crit damage rating on his special attack, so nothing really too overwhelming for this champion in the current state of the game. And he doesn't really gain a whole lot from his synergies. I guess really the only noteworthy one is the synergy that he shares with Venom, where he can add one buff to his buff counter. So instead of having a max of 5, he can have a max of 6, and Venom gains a similar benefit from that as well. So in terms of the champion, not a whole lot going on for him currently, but let's go ahead and have a look at the beta of the game and see the different changes that have been made to him, because there's some really cool stuff going on with his abilities. So now, as you can see, we are officially in the beta version of the game, and one thing that's really interesting about this version is that Kabam gave a lot of resources to really do all the sorts of tinkering with the champion, and I don't have pictures or video footage of that, but if we jump here into the stash, you can see that they supplied me, as of today, with a lot of cosmic ISO, and this is all ISO that they provided upon logging into the game here, and that just allowed me to take those champions up to max rank. And then in the store, they supplied a bunch of rank down tickets if you want to take them back down off of a rank, or rank up tickets for the 4 and 5 star variants. So you can see here just a bunch of different rank up gems that are specific to Carnage and Venom, and this doesn't carry over into the game, unfortunately. But I have already taken the liberty of putting Venom and Carnage up to rank 5 in this version of the game. So let's go ahead and have a look at Carnage himself and the rework state that he's currently in. Since they're max rank, they're going to be down here towards the bottom. So jumping in and having another look at Carnage here, you'll see other than his stats changing at a first glance, you really don't see a whole lot of a difference. The name of his ability hasn't changed, his synergies haven't changed. So there's, at a first glance, I was actually kind of confused. I thought they bypassed the rework that they had promised, but when you take a closer look at the abilities, you'll see that actually a couple of things have changed, and they're a little subtle, but we're going to go over them. So now his passive ability, or his ability once you've awakened him, is very different from what it used to be. So now it's still linked to the character bleeding, but when the opponent is bleeding, you now gain at level 20 here, you gain just under 6% of a bar of power per second based on how close Carnage is to the target. So it works kind of similar to how Blade works when he has a bleed triggered on the opponent. It's not quite as powerful as far as the power gain that he gets off of it, but of course the percentage does ramp up if you have him on a higher sig level. So the passive ability, as far as his the buffs that are provided by performing different actions in game, the numbers have changed slightly, but they pretty much all do the same thing, or they do exactly the same thing. Those numbers have changed just slightly as far as scaling wise, but the biggest thing that you'll see as being a change is Carnage now has a couple of changes that have been made. So the bleed off of his heavy attacks, though it still is there's a 100% chance for it to inflict. It now lasts for 15 seconds, so a little bit longer there, as well as critical hits now have a 100% chance to inflict an additional bleed against a bleeding target or an armor broken target as well. Now that doesn't mean that if the champion is bleed immune that you will be able to get a bleed to proc on them, unfortunately. But that's another interesting thing that's been added to this his kit, is that there's some armor break that can be applied as well, and you see that here in the Ravager section that says if one of his bleeds, this is a whole new ability that was added in that I think it adds two really interesting things. The second a little more useful, but this first ability says that if one of his bleeds fails to apply due to an immunity, he has a 100% chance to armor break the opponent instead. And this armor break lasts for 10 seconds instead of the 15-second bleed or the longer bleed off of the special 3. And unfortunately, it doesn't stack. But what is really interesting about this particular ability is that each time Carnage triggers a bleed, he has a 99% chance to refresh the duration of all bleed debuffs. And that comes in really handy, especially when we get down to and have a look at the special 3 here. Now, one thing that's really cool for Carnage at the beginning of the fight is he gains 50% additional power from striking his opponent, so he has some increased power gain. So that works in complete contrast to a champion like Psylocke, where she gains less power off of striking her opponent. So Carnage gains more power off of striking his opponent, only if he doesn't have buffs on him. So you'll see that as he has more and more buffs placed on him, that actually does decrease and becomes less effective, but it provides a significant advantage right off the bat at the start of a fight. Now, the Special 1 and Special 2 have relatively similar numbers to what he currently has in the current state of the game, but the Special 3 still has that 100% chance to inflict a bleed. That bleed now lasts for 30 seconds, unless, as we just had a view a moment ago, it becomes refreshed by a bleed ability that's already active, or by triggering a secondary bleed. So lots of really cool tweaks have been made to this character that have made him, in my opinion, a lot of fun to play around with, and I've currently been having some fun with him in a couple of pieces of not necessarily the endgame content, some of the chapters of Act 4, and the Road to the Labyrinth as well. Or I guess I should say Realm of Legends rather than Road to the Labyrinth. So let's go ahead and have a look at a showcase for the character. Now, one other thing I want to point out before we jump into this quest is I've just kind of built a synergy team around Carnage and Venom that allow them to have a little bit of some additional crit. Most of that's coming from the Venom synergy. So there's some additional crit damage and crit rating here, but we'll have a little bit of a closer look at what Venom's rework is in a separate video. This is, I guess, kind of a teaser of what they've done for him, but we'll take another look at that here in a separate video later. So let's go ahead and jump in and just kind of have a crack at Winter Soldier and see how Carnage holds up against Winter Soldier here in Realm of Legends. Now, I guess one thing I was going to say is I thought that there may have been a possibility of the special animations to be reworked for either or both characters. Unfortunately, they do still both have the same animations, which isn't terrible. I just thought that this may have been a good opportunity for them to rework one or both of the animations, but all Special 1, 2, and 3 animations for both characters are exactly the same as they were previously. So right off the bat here with this fight with Winter Soldier, we're going to get in a parry, or we're going to attempt to at least, and then we will get that bleed to proc. And now you see that power gain, and it's just kind of slowly ticking upward as we stand close to Winter Soldier here. So the Special 3 still has the same animation, and I apologize that you can't hear any of the in-game sounds for this. I just don't have a recording program that records the sounds for these anymore. Oop. Taking a couple of hits there. Get a crit there. And this is what I think brings a lot of fun aspect to the characters. You can just kind of spam that heavy attack, or that special one over and over again, and just look at those bleeds that stack up on Winter Soldier there. And I personally have found that getting more of the crit damage buffs to be permanent from those genetic mutations, so trying to cater to get a heavy attack in pretty quick after using a special attack. And then we'll get one more of those. Or maybe we'll go with a critical buff. And so we've currently got his buffs maxed out there. See if we can get Winter Soldier to use his special attack. And unfortunately that bleed is dropped off, so we'll just kind of refresh that with another heavy attack. Get punched in the face once or twice, but that really doesn't matter. Now what you'll see with this Special 3 that I'm letting off is, now that I've got the buffs placed exactly how I want them to kind of maximize the damage and crit damage from him, we're just not even going to worry too much about what his power does, because just by being kind of aggressive, or playing aggressively, we can keep that bleed off of the Special 3 up with 100% uptime, which means that every successive crit that we get will just continue to make him bleed. So you can see that he really starts to get quite a bit of a damage ramp up. And you can see that the bleeds from that heavy attack that I let off a minute ago, they do stack, because I had the bleed from before I let off the Special 3, the bleed from the Special 3 itself, and then the bleed from that second heavy attack that I did a moment ago that is remaining active. And just kind of look at how the power just continuously creeps up on the meter, just with the proximity that we have to Winter Soldier here. Get another heavy attack bleed there. Oh, and I got tagged by that special, but let's... And I got tagged by that one as well. And unfortunately, we weren't able to finish him off, so that's my mistake. But you can see we got him all the way down to 3% health and 300 hits in. So definitely not crazy amounts of damage output. And, you know, I made a couple of goofs there at the end as well. But that's just kind of a general showcase of what Carnage could potentially do. Now, one thing that I would probably, if I were to make a recommendation for kind of a last tweak, is I would personally find it a lot more useful if you were just able to activate whatever buff was currently active on Carnage when activating a special attack. I just feel like there'd be a lot more useful value by from the character that way, because that would allow him to, you wouldn't have to wait that second, that timer out and potentially have take a hit or get clipped and then have that persistent block proficiency buff or physical resistance buff on your character for the whole fight, especially for some of these longer fights. But if this is the way that they want to keep Carnage, then I would be very, very content with that character as he currently is. So we'll take a look at Venom and his specifics in a little bit of a later video here, but that was really what I wanted to showcase in terms of Carnage and what they've done with him. I'm very, very happy with the improvements that they're looking to make and will very possibly make Carnage a rank 5 character upon the release of this attribute into the game. So it'll be interesting to see if this is truly what they go through with having and releasing. But that's really what I wanted to showcase as far as Carnage. So we'll be back with a video for Venom a little bit later. But thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day.